Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting. Before we commence the meeting, I'll just ask that everyone turns their mobile phones off or switch them to silent. Thank you. My name is Councillor Gary Thompson, and I am the chair of this committee. The Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting is being live streamed on the council website to enable public viewing of the proceedings, including councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting will also be recorded and will be made available on the council website as soon as practically possible after the meeting. Should there be technical problems encountered during the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is resolved, or if need be, the meeting will be postponed. I'll start by introducing my fellow councillors and officers. Seated to my left and closest to me, Councillor Jim Park, adjacent Councillor Felicity Sinfield, Councillor Wes Galt, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, and closest on my right, Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Susan Bigger, Councillor Di Gillies, and our Mayor, Councillor Jane Addis. We have a number of officers in attendance this evening. Seated behind Councillor Galt is our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Philip Storer. Seated adjacent to Mr Storer is Mr Daniel Freer, Director of Places and Spaces. Seated behind Councillor Gillies, we have our Chief Financial Officer, Miss Amy Montalti. Seated to my immediate left, Manager of Governance and Legal, Mr Brian Wee, and to his immediate left, Miss Kirsten Ritchie, Coordinator of Governance. Mr Scott Walker is situated to my right, who will be a responsible director this evening. There are also a number of other officers in attendance, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. Essentially, the purpose of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee is to deal with issues under the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. This committee has delegated authority to make decisions on behalf of Council. Councillors are familiar with the report, which includes a summary of all objections received. For those of you in the gallery this evening presenting, when it comes to the agenda item, it will be introduced by an officer. I will then call you up one by one to come forward to address the committee, and you'll be seated at the end of the horseshoe table. If you're making a submission, please present your viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. I ask that you don't repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the submissions focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, please inform the committee as to why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach that would satisfy your concerns. Please focus on your concerns rather than matters of history or detail in the officer's report. There is a strict limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, including councillors, and whilst I reserve the right to vary that time, I seldom do. At the 2.5 minute mark, I'll ring this bell, which will mean that you've got 30 seconds to conclude your presentation this evening. Mr Wee, are there any apologies this evening?
Through you, Chair, Councillor Watson and Councillor Stavro are both apologies this evening.
Thank you, Mr Wee. I'll move to item 1, adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting held on the 17th of October 2022. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion to move and adopt the minutes. Councillor Addis?
So moved.
And seconded Councillor Galt. Is there any opposition on that? There being none, I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 2, councillors, are there any conflicts of interests of any councillors or council officers this evening? There appears to be none. Thank you. So we'll move to item 3.1, presentation of the officer's report, 15 Broadway, Camberwell, extension to house in a heritage overlay. This will be introduced by Mr Damien Boo, Senior Statutory Planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Item 3.1 relates to an extension to an existing contributory graded dwelling in a heritage overlay at 15 Broadway, Camberwell. The site is located within Neighbourhood Residential Zone 3 and within Heritage Overlay 159, the Prospect Hill Road precinct. A planning permit is required for the full demolition of the second non-contributory graded dwelling, partial demolition of the existing contributory graded dwelling, and constructions of alterations and additions. The decision plans are those attached in Appendix D of the report, and the planning assessment report notes that there have been 16 objections received. A response to these matters raised in the objections have been included on pages 21 to 23 of the report. The application has been referred to Council's Heritage Advisor. As part of the referral process, Council officers have undertaken extensive site inspections and reviews and liaised with Council's Heritage Advisor. Written comments were provided based on the assessment of the submitted plans and on-site photographic evidence provided by Council officers. The full comments are attached on page 24 to 29 within the planning report. Based on the assessment against the objectives of the Heritage Overlay and Heritage Policy, Council officers recommend issuing a Notice of Decision to grant a planning permit for the following reasons. The proposed development results in an overall improvement to the heritage streetscape and precinct by virtue of the full demolition of the non-contributory dwelling fronting Berwick Street, which includes the existing crossovers, driveways and fencing. The extent of demolition to the existing dwelling, contributory existing dwelling, will not result in loss of any contributing heritage fabric. The proposed development results in an enhanced heritage outcome to the contributory dwelling given the car parking on the Broadway and Berwick Street corner, which will be now landscaped. Subject to conditions increasing the setback to the Berwick Street frontage, the proposed additions to the contributory grade dwelling are supported given the form, siding, scale, and materiality will appropriately respect the heritage significance and contribution of the existing dwelling. The siding of the addition will be located along the western and northern boundaries of the subject site, mostly away from the existing building. The proposed basement ramp is supported, given the entrance to the basement will be set back 14.49 metres from Broadway, softened by landscaping treatments within the front setback and located to the side of the existing dwelling. As a bonus, and on top of this, the fence and vehicular gate will further limit any visual impact to the streetscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boo. Councillors, we've got 3 presenters this evening, 2 against and 1 a qualified for. So I'll call forward our first presenter this evening, Mr. Greg Deakin, if you can come forward, and followed by Ms. Liz Burton. Thank you, Mr. Deakin. When you're ready, if you can just commence with your name and your suburb and your 3-minute presentation.
Greg Deakin, I live at 5 Broadway, just a few doors from this house. This development will compromise the integrity of the Heritage Overlay Area HA 159. The original Victorian residence is designed to sit on the corner of Broadway and Berwick Street and to be viewed from both streets. It's a really remarkable house. The addition of the existing modern structure at 1A Berwick Street has compromised the siting of the original residence. So the demolition of this non-contributory secondary building provides an opportunity to improve the streetscape with an appropriately designed and sympathetic extension to the original house. However, the design submitted does not achieve such an improvement, with the proposed new wing on Berwick Street compromising the original heritage structure. The gable roof facing Berwick Street has been reduced in height, but it still dominates the side gable of the original house. Could we have this image of the... That's right. So you can see the right half of the slide is the modern material. Sorry, where was I? While the incongruity of the oversized natural stone chimney is identified in the report, the new chimney is still very prominent and very close to Berwick Street. The chimney dimensions need to be reduced so that it's less prominent vis-à-vis the elegant existing chimneys. And the flat roof structure to the rear clashes aesthetically with the gabled roof of the original house. The net effect is that the east elevation reveals a large modern house of mixed character attached to the original Victorian house and somewhat dominating it. Now, the flat roof structure is problematic. A neighbourhood character of Precinct 43 says roofs are generally pitched and are clad in terracotta tiles or slate. The general form of the addition, where a small flat roof section provides an offset from the original building to the new pitched roof of the terrace, is supported. That's a quote from the report, which I find quite baffling. Although there would be visibility of the addition to the north along Berwick Street, this is considered acceptable given the existing building at 1A Berwick Street is located in this area. It's an extraordinary statement. So you're justifying the flat roof section of the new plan based on the really ordinary modern addition that you're going to knock down. So similarly with the south elevation, where the large gable on the extension dominates the gable on the original house and introduces a modern aesthetic into the Broadway streetscape, the extension is definitely not recessive next to the existing heritage building and can't be read as a secondary element, whether viewed from Broadway to the south or from Berwick Street to the east.
I'll ask that you wrap up your presentation now, Mr Deakin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, any questions for Mr Deakin? There appears to be none. Thank you for your presentation this evening. Our next presenter this evening is Miss Burton. If you can come forward, please. And followed by Miss Burton, Miss Mark Stanovic. You're going to correct me on that, I'm sure. Miss Burton, if we can commence with your name and your suburb, followed by your 3-minute presentation. Thank you.
Liz Burton. I live in Camberwell, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this item. I am recommending that it not be approved, and I would like to draw attention to specific provisions in the Burundara planning scheme. So firstly, you can see here for the clause 15.03, heritage, the contributory heritage places policy guidelines shows that siting and massing development to be behind and visually recessive to the heritage place, as shown in figures 1, 2 and 3. Our next item, please. So here you can see from an aerial perspective that it should not be, the additions should be at the rear. Next item. So that is an oblique perspective showing you in this case that there is an addition at the rear, but it cannot be seen even from an oblique view from the street. Next item. This is the current house as it is now from the architectural plans. Next item. So this is what is proposed. So on the western side, as you can see, it does not conform to the Burundara planning scheme. We can see very clearly the item which is to accommodate particular aspects of the addition. And I should point out that an entire house is being demolished at the rear of this property because it comprises 2 titles, but it's still not enough to accommodate the additions. This is one of the most highly valued and cherished precincts in all of Camberwell, and it is described as homogeneous, highly intact, and it is of outstanding quality, representing Victorian and Edwardian properties. Next item. So I just want to draw attention to the objectives to retain and conserve contributory places and fabric in the heritage overlay, which are visible from the primary street frontage, to facilitate sympathetic additions, alterations and new buildings to contributory heritage places which are massed, detailed, finished and located to preserve the presentation of the place from the street. Next item. I'm just referring back here to 6 Kintore Street. Another, this one is a significant property where you can see that again, the committee has approved alterations and additions that can be seen, and there is something very wrong happening in the interpretation of the way in which the planning scheme is intended to operate in a precinct of this high value.
If you can wrap up your presentation, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for Ms Burton this evening? There appears to be none. Thank you for your presentation, Ms Burton. Our final presenter this evening is Mr Mark Stanovic. If you can come forward, and if you can just commence with your name and the company you're representing. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. Good evening, everyone. Mark Stanovich from ASK Planning. I represent Phil and Catherine Watt, my clients here this evening, who are proud purchasers of this property. We do come here in somewhat unusual circumstances to the extent that we're actually seeking to delete one dwelling. So I've got a proposal, of course, before you from currently 2 dwellings down to 1, a single-storey extension, and certainly a very respectful and what we call a modest proposition on a site of almost 1,200 or over 1,200 square metres. What that does mean with the demolition of the existing dwelling at the rear and the various reinstatement of existing crossings and driveways is that we achieve a little over 46% garden area, and we think this is a significant contribution in terms of the ultimate result, not just about the built form and how we think it will seamlessly integrate with the existing building, but also a landscape setting, which is a significant part of this heritage precinct and broader locality. 2 crossings reinstated, driveways reinstated, front fence reinstated, all the typical aspects that one would expect as part of a significant or contributory house in a heritage setting. So we accept all of the conditions, 1A through to 1U, that have been put to you, but we do take issue with condition 1B. We'd suggest to you that that condition ought to read 1 metre rather than 2 metres from Berwick Street. And we say that because we come with a very modest, open, alfresco style, single-storey extension. It's not 2 stories like the images that were just shown to you about sight lines and how one ought to try and conceal them from view. And the existing conditions on the site are significant in terms of your consideration favourably for the proposal before you this evening. Ultimately, like you've heard from residents locally, my clients too want to achieve something which provides for an open, enjoyable backyard realm, something that fits very comfortably in its setting, reinstates the original setting to the beautiful host heritage building, and in what it will be ultimately a treed environment, it will match very comfortably with the buildings around it. And when we look at it in the context of the front setbacks along Berwick Street as well, we think that a suggested condition 1B at 1 metre will certainly achieve that comfortably at around 5.5 metres, where it was advertised at 4.5. What's proposed before you was 6.5. So we think that's a reasonable compromise, all things considered. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Councillors, are there any questions of our presenter this evening? Yes, there is. Councillor Franco.
Sorry, could you, thank you, Chair. The amendment that you're seeking is specifically to which clause of the...
It's clause 1B, changing 2 to 1.
Thank you.
2 to 1. There are some other subtleties that would go with that in terms of effectively the join between the old with the veranda and the new with the gable is a pantry, and there is capacity to reduce that height, but it's difficult to try and capture the nuances in the essence of the condition. But fundamentally, with a 1 metre setback requirement, we think that could be captured.
Thank you. Councillor Franco, any further questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation this evening. So, councillors would turn to officers for any matters arising.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've certainly heard a range of submissions tonight. With respect to the matters arising, we've heard matters relating to the form and modernity and how it relates to...
Sorry, can you just move a bit louder, please? Particularly.
Of course, my apologies. As I was saying, we've heard matters raised in relation to the form and how it relates to the existing dwelling. We believe that based on the modernity and the traditional relationship that has with the form, it's an acceptable outcome that which does not dominate or detract from the original heritage building. That's partly in thanks to the siding of the addition, which is located along the western boundary, set back and also stepped back from the prominence of the existing dwelling, which will be set forward of the additions. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, just to add to some of the matters that have been raised earlier, there has been some concern raised in relation to the proposal not meeting policy. Officers disagree with that interpretation. The heritage policy specifically allows for interpretive designs as one of the options for contributory places that honestly admit their modernity while relating to the character of the surrounds. And the officer's position is that that has been what has been presented within the Broadway elevation with the new gable, modern interpretive gable. This is supported by Council's heritage advisor as well. Other strategies also talk about how new buildings need to be visually recessive and read as a secondary element. It doesn't specifically say that the new additions need to be not visible from the street. In relation to the oblique views and sightline diagrams that was shared with the chamber, that is in relation to upper level additions. As for ground level additions, the policy specifically says that ground level additions should have side setbacks that are the same or similar to those within the precinct. Officers would say that this is the reason for condition 1B. It's to bring the new addition of the terrace and the new chimney in line with the original fabric of the building, which is the pantry. If you were to move that forward, then it would obstruct views of the heritage place if you were viewing it along Berwick Street. So for that reason, Council's heritage advisor has put forward that recommendation. It could even be said that a greater setback could even be sought to try and differentiate the new addition wall along Berwick Street from the original fabric of the building. However, the assessment has been that the visibility of the new additions are such that they're either in line with the fabric of the original building or they're recessed behind it, and so therefore it meets the heritage policy in relation to being a secondary element and not being taking dominance over the original heritage place due to the recessions or the matching of the setback. And so therefore it would meet policy. We would also note that the terrace is of a significant size and that a 2-metre setback in this context wouldn't be unreasonable in the officer's view. In relation to the flat roof portion of the built form, officers would comment that that flat roof form is clearly providing a clear separation between the new gable roof as well as the original building itself, and it provides a good delineation between old and new, and so therefore that is supported from both Council's heritage advisor's perspective as well as the officer's perspective. And in relation to the chimney height and visibility, officers would say that that is entirely appropriate should the condition that requires condition condition 1E, that requires the material of the new chimney breast to the terrace to be revised to either exposed brick or rendered masonry. Currently, it's proposed in a stone material, which is at odds with any of the materials that are found within the streetscape, and so therefore the recommendation has been to include condition 1E to change that material to something that is more sympathetic to the original fabric of the building. So in conclusion, comments would be that the proposal is an interpretive, modern design that responds well towards the original fabric of the heritage place. It's located towards the side of the host building and is either located in line with or recessed behind the original fabric of the place. Thank you.
Thank you, officers. We do have a few questions from councillors. Our Mayor, Councillor Addis, followed by Councillor Gillies.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm seeking to get a clearer sense of 1B and perhaps an elevation up on the screen, because I'm trying to get a sense of we're recommending a further 2 metres, and I understand the applicant would prefer a further 1 metre, not 2. Is it possible to see an image or have some clarity about how that would look?
We'll show the floor plan as well, Councillor Addis, because it might be helpful to see that.
It's probably more I take your point, the elevation, to try and get a sense of the appearance.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. If you can clearly see the plans up on the screen here, I'll just quickly point to where the setback is proposed. Just for the record, I'll circle it on the plans. And to give clarity on what Council's condition seeks to achieve, I've got an excerpt from Council's Delegates report with a line marked out with the additional 2 metre setback. So as indicated by the red line as shown on the screen, that's the intent of Council's setback that we're seeking to add to the setback of the terrace, where the applicant believes that the 1 metre setback will be somewhere between there.
And is it possible to assist Councillor Addis with an elevation as well?
Because I'm presuming it's behind, like there's a fence there. That's what I'm trying to get a sense
so
of.
Street elevation rather than a building elevation.
Thank you.
Have we got a street elevation?
Yes, I believe this is the proposed east elevation, and the terrace in question to be set back is the central located gable.
Have we got a footpath elevation with the fence?
Sure. Yes, with the fence, as you can see on the screen here.
So it's the gable behind the chimney. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Councillor Gillies, followed by Councillor Galt and Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair. Can I clarify, please, if regarding 1B and the additional 2 metre setback, if we were to modify that, does that in any way compromise compliance of this application?
Thanks, Chair, through yourself. Perhaps just to clarify in regard to the application that we're dealing with, it's an application triggered under the heritage overlay. And often when we use the term compliance, we talk about setbacks and obligations under Res Code and other provisions. That's not what we're considering here. We're considering the heritage elements. So you have, and we have, discretion to consider the heritage based on the advice and the relevant tests under the heritage policy. The advice that we've received from a heritage point of view and officers in reviewing that heritage advice is that the 2 metre setback is required to meet the heritage expectations and outcomes for this site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Gold.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I have 2 questions, and they're related to each other, so I might ask them both together. There's a requirement there that the colour or the tone of the walls be a mid-grey or a lighter grey. And I remember some other applications in this area which we reviewed, which they were asked to put them in monument or black because it was recessive and had less impact on the street. The other thing that happened, if I can remember those applications correctly, they also had some black detailing in the windows and lacework, etc. So it had a tendency to tie the extension together with the existing dwelling using colour. So I'd be interested to know why, in this case, we're going for grey to lighter grey, and is there any requirement to tie that colour into the original dwelling on site in any way, shape or form? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much for that question. In relation to the materials and the colour choice, so it's considered that the colour which is currently displayed on the plans is one that is overly dark and it's not visually recessive. There will also be a creation of a strong sense of contrast between the new addition and the heritage place. In the view of Council's heritage advisor, this would then generate visual bulk to the proposed addition, and so there's been a request for a more sympathetic finish that should be included as a condition on the permit.
Through yourself, Chair, and I might just add here, what the Heritage Advisor is saying here is that the darkness and the stark dark material relative to the materials and finishes of the existing dwelling is the issue at hand here. So you might actually take a different view in different circumstances about the colours and materials depending on what is existing in the existing dwelling or in the prevailing materials and finishes in the surrounding area. So it's relative to the materials and finishes of the dwelling here and the impact that it would have on undermining that, that particular contributory building.
If I may, the particular application I'm thinking of, I think was in the same section of street. It was also a red brick building, and the dark colour monument or close to black was recommended at that time. I'd also be interested to get your comments on what colours in the existing building would help you justify a grey to lighter grey, if that's the intent.
And again, through yourself, Chair, I think the grey and lighter grey was one option, along with the lighter cream colours as well. I think was the recommendations and advice, and it's really just to soften the impact relative to the existing contributory building.
Could we confirm that that is a joint requirement, that you're looking at a lighter grey and some of the trim colours at the same time?
Through yourself, Chair, just there's a few references to the lightening of materials in condition 1. and that includes condition 1G, which refers to the garage door to be a lighter finish to satisfaction of the responsible authority. So the reference is to a lighter finish only with discretion by the responsible authority. 1H, proposed finish of the fence. The fence must be in a light hue. The dark finish is not permitted to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. So again, discretion around the lightness and what the final colour is with that lighter finish. So there's certainly reference also then 1I to a lighter finish for the sliding gate to satisfaction of responsible authority. So there's a bit of discretion there around what the final colour will be to the satisfaction of officers in consultation with the Heritage Advisor.
Sorry if I may, Chair. I don't want to labour the point, but my query related back to the original heritage dwelling. And in the previous applications, I remember we tried to tie some of the window colours and lace colours in with the colour of the extension of the back. But the examples you've given, thank you very much, relate to new elements of the work, but don't seem to tie back to the original heritage dwelling in any way.
I think Mr Walker's answered that. It's probably subjective, Councillor Gold, as to whether you accept the lighter notes in the officer's recommendations. We'll move to Councillor Sinfield. You had your light on, you turned it off and it's back on, so I can come to you.
I did, thank you. I thought my question was going to be answered earlier by a question raised by one of my colleagues, but it was not, so my light went back on. My question relates to the 2 metre setback that we've been discussing and how that relates to the section of raised terrace. So I understand how it relates to the chimney and the wall and the couple of windows, as I perceive them to be there. But the red dotted line on the plan that Mr Boo showed earlier indicated that that red dotted line continued down to the raised terrace area, which in my mind would be some form of a garden as opposed to a built structure. And I'm just wanting a little bit of extra clarity, please, about that next section.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor, for your question. In relation to the red line, I will say that that's just an arbitrary line on the figure to demonstrate the setback. There is no intent to set back the raised terrace, as there is no wall that you can see over the fence that's proposed.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And a second question, if I may. I can't quite zoom in with enough clarity on my set of plans here in relation to the size of the terrace, but when I saw it up on the screen earlier, it seems to be a very generous 12 plus metres in length. Are you able to just clarify the length of that outdoor terrace there for me?
Thank you. Yep, just based on my calculations here, it's about 18 metres by 5 metres.
Can I just add a clarification? That terrace also includes a spa and a pool, based on those dimensions you've just...
That's a different section to which I'm referring, Chair.
Just the outdoor dining area.
The terrace behind the gable.
Yeah, I was only referring to the dining area there, but the line that indicates the length there does stop well short of the chimney and the wall. So your 18 metres now makes sense with that section being at 12 metres. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Franco?
Thank you. A few different questions, if I may, Chair. Staying with the setback issue, why have you only recommended 2 metres and not more? I'm actually surprised that you haven't recommended more. And would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. The 2 metres is the minimum requirement that's been put forward by a heritage advisor. There was scope to set it back further, but in this instance, we do have to balance out the livability of the proposed extension. So in this instance, we believe it's an acceptable outcome to go with the minimum 2 metre figure.
Just one further question on this particular point. Could you not have gone up to, say, the north-facing window line?
Through yourself, Chair, I think that's arguable, that you can always go, you can always increase the setback. What officers have put forward to based on the heritage advice and heritage review and a review of the policy, is a setback of 2 metres to line with the front pantry wall of the existing dwelling. So that's what they've lined it up with, in line with the policy and based on the advice, and that's deemed and considered an acceptable and appropriate outcome in these circumstances, given that this is a side street with substantial setbacks, fencing in front, landscaping and the like.
Thank you. I have a couple of other questions on some other issues. On page 25 of the PDF, for those looking at an electronic version, but it's numbered page 20 of 36, and it's numbered page 27. So the question at the start of that, it talks about including a condition, the first dot point on that page, the colour of the new sliding gate revised to a lighter finish to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. The words "to the satisfaction of the responsible authority," is that, I'm quite happy with it, but I'd like to understand how often we impose conditions that say that.
Again, through yourself, Chair, that's a standard approach to ensuring compliance, but not necessarily locking in on a specific outcome, where there's a little bit of discretion and a little bit of opportunity to negotiate a suitable outcome based on a range of options put forward by an applicant. That's where there's often reference to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. It enables discretion to consider those elements as the final designs are locked in.
Thank you. Another question, and this relates, let's say, it appears in a few spots, page 23 of the PDF or 18 of 36, and also numbered page 25. There's the words, I'll try and pick the easiest place to spot the words. Under summary and conditions, it says the use of off-white, this is the second sentence, the use of off-white rendered masonry construction is supported as the material would pay homage to the historic masonry streetscape. And similarly, similar words are used in a number of other places where it suggests that we're trying to match the existing materials rather than specifically differentiate. And perhaps this goes to Councillor Galt's questions, but I'd like to revise it. Rather than looking to match the existing finishes, I'm surprised that we're pushing in a direction to replicate more, and I'm a little bit surprised. So could you speak to why we're going in that direction? I can point some other versions of the wording.
I think the officers have got the gist of your question, Councillor Franco.
Thanks, Chair. And perhaps it's important to note there, perhaps even in that reference that was made to the use of off-white rendered masonry construction is supported, and that's the advice of the heritage advisor. But it goes on to say, as the material will pay homage to the historic masonry streetscape, but whilst distinguishing itself as a later addition. So it still makes the important point that it's not trying to mirror exactly what's there. It's still demonstrating that it's a later and more modern addition.
Can I point one further sentence out? Say, above that one, summary and conditions, you go up the third paragraph above that, which starts with the original dwelling. Do you see that? And if you look at the sentence within that, in the middle of that, Council's Heritage Advisor notes the proposed mid-grey colour choice is overly dark and not visually recessive and would create a strong sense of contrast between the new addition and the historic building. So, I mean, there I think it's probably spelled out.
Thanks, Chair. And perhaps if I just go a little bit further, what the Heritage Advisor and the officers are saying is that the dark materials and colours draws out the modern extension, and it makes that the dominant feature of the site. And that's what the Heritage Advisor is trying to avoid. What is actually trying to occur on this site with the change in materials and finishes is to still demonstrate that the additions are new and modern, but they are recessive compared to the dominant contributory heritage building. And in fact, this site, it is a double site and there is an existing dwelling that's being demolished. You've got to consider all the different elements and things that are going on here. And the extension, the newer extension, is to the west and the north. And we actually lose some of the existing dominance of the driveways. There's a gravel driveway and car parking and the like direct to the corner of the property. And they get moved away. And what we end up with is the heritage contributory building being the strong dominant feature on the corner. And the Heritage Advisor is trying to ensure that with putting more muted tones onto the extension.
Thanks, Councillor Franco. Councillor Gillies, I note your light is on again.
Thank you, Chair. Just to foreshadow a motion when you're ready, thanks.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions of officers? Councillor Gillies, I think you've given us fair warning of a motion.
Thank you, Chair. The officer's recommendation is the motion I propose. Thank you.
Thank you. And councillors, I'm in search of a seconder to that. Councillor Addis?
Happy to second.
To assist Councillor Gillies, is there any opposition on that? There appears to be no opposition. Councillor Gillies, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Very briefly, thanks, Chair. Firstly, to acknowledge that HO 159 is most definitely an outstanding heritage precinct. This is, I believe, an application that not only complies with planning policies, it increases the garden space and landscaping, and actually does show an appreciation of architectural expression and sympathy with some heritage protection. So I thank the officers for their work. I thank the officers also for working with the applicants to achieve a number of amendments that seem to have kept everybody happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. As there was no opposition on that item, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 4, general business. Councillors, are there any matters of general business? Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you, Mr Chair. I would just like to ask Miss Ritchie if she can to please put up an image. And I just wanted to talk to a matter that we can actually celebrate here as Berendara Council, having an incredible outcome with what has been the Master Builders Association Victoria Excellent in Housing Award winner, and this property is in our very own queue, and the property underwent very comprehensive assessment by our planning department, and it was actually refused under officer delegation, but through that refusal, through it going to VCAT and through the officers having significant input in their recommendations of what would be an appropriate application, the applicant, the architects, VCAT, listened to Berendara's officers, and the result is what is here before us. This exemplar property was originally going to be joined in sections. What officers' recommendation was a separation between the buildings to enable a greater capacity to do appropriate landscape, to give sensitive interface to the buildings, to add additional elements, but also recognising objective concerns, improving setbacks, and just basically the three podiums that we see in the images here provide a beautiful environment to the landscape of the Studley Park area. And as an exemplar design, the people on the panel, which were largely members of VCAT, renowned architects, renowned builders, all voted that this was by far the superior exemplar property that won the Excellence Award. So I just wanted to say congratulations to our planning department, Berendara, and by striving to achieve the highest possible standard, that's the result. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Might encourage the architect to put that into the Urban Design Awards for us for next year. Councillor Gold.
If I could just add to that, I don't think the photographs do it justice. It is a very delicately detailed building. It's quite lovely. It's one of my neighbours, and it is very well designed. And the gap between the buildings just gives you that hint of a lovely distant view too, which is very clever indeed.
Very good. Thank you, councillors. Any further items of general business this evening? There being none, are there any items of urgent business? There being none, are there any items of confidential business? There being none, I declare the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting closed at 7:25 p.m. Thank you, everyone.